2. This is going to be our look into imports, exports. We'll look at a little bit of ag policy. We'll look at a little bit about what the USDA does and what the farmers' share is of some stuff. So we'll just dig right in, okay? So a lot of people get confused between imports and exports and what that entails. And so I just want to go over that a little bit. Exports are the products that we ship to different countries around the world. So we are a huge grower of corn and we export a lot of corn. So that's an example of that. Imports are what we bring into the United States. So we bring in, we do grow rice in the United States, but we also import it from different countries as well. And so if you look at the numbers, we export about $115 billion and we import about $80 billion. So there's definitely a little bit of difference there. But one thing that's for sure is that our economy in agriculture really depends on imports and exports and how we utilize them. I'm sure you've heard in the news, if you listen to the news or if you watch the news, you've heard about these different deals that are being done with imports and exports. You've heard of the NAFTA deal, and you've heard of different deals that we do with big customers like China, like Russia, and those are really important to those small type farmers because they know that their product is going to go somewhere. And so it's really important to keep up on that type of news and really understand why we're selling to different parts of the world. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a is how many dollars that might entail, that might give us as far as exports, okay? So I want you to look at soybeans. So we export about $15 million, a little over half, $15.5 million worth of soybeans, which is a little bit lower or a little bit higher than corn. So a lot of people ask, well, why do we export more soybeans in terms of dollars than we do corn? The reason why that number is so different is because of the prices of soybeans. So if you look at prices in terms of soybeans versus corn, we can sell a bushel of soybeans anywhere from let's be honest, about $9.30 to anywhere above 11. And so that's kind of the price range for soybeans on any given year. Corn, it's a little bit different. It's a lot smaller than what it used to be. So it can range anywhere from $3 to $5, even maybe a little bit more if you got some different types of corn. So that's why that is a little bit different. And then you look at livestock, you look at beef and poultry or beef and pork, as opposed to poultry. A little bit different there, but that's just because we've gotten pretty good at raising beef and pork, and a lot of countries around the world already utilize poultry as a part of their farming and ranching. So total exports about a little less than $115 million. Of different crops, sugars being a good player in that. The big one that we look at is grain and feeds. Why do we do that? Unfortunately, we see a trend with prices a lot of times, and that could actually vary year by year, but it's a little bit cheaper for us to import different types of grains and different types of feed, especially if we could utilize that grain into a feed or feed stuff that would be cheaper than growing it ourselves. And so that number will fluctuate just a little bit, but it's probably always going to be above fruits. And fruits is obviously big and in terms of American agriculture, but we've seen a lot of neat research going on with fruits and vegetables, and I think that will always be a good thing, and hopefully we'll learn how to grow those better so we don't have to import that as much. Okay, so let's talk about jobs. One of the really important parts of this class that I hope you understand is the job factor within agriculture. We provide food and fiber. We provide 23 million jobs to Americans, which is huge. And that's about 2.3 million people, or like we talked about a little bit ago, in chapter 1, about 1% is directly employed by farming, which is huge. But we don't really see the vast majority of jobs. We see different kinds of jobs in agriculture, but we don't really look and see what kind of jobs you and I could have. So here's just a couple that I want to talk through. You could be a seed salesman. You could be an equipment dealer. You could be into food processing. You could make a chemical fertilizer. You might not be in the field. You might be in a lab, but you're still involving yourself in agriculture, which is pretty neat. This is where we make our money. This is where these agribusiness type firms really show us how to make money, how to improve our bottom line, how to utilize different markets, how to utilize vertical integration, if that's a good thing. We'll talk about that. Vertical integration is just when one single firm or store controls several stages of it. So for those of you that might not be familiar with agriculture, a great example of that would be Target, or Walmart. So I'm a Target girl, Target. But Target they have their own brand of things. So they have their own brand of food. They'll have their own brand of clothing. They go through the whole manufacturing process. I mean, they're from start to finish. They do sell other types of brands of food and clothing, but they have their own brand, just like Walmart, the Great Value brand. That's vertical integration, being able to concentrate on many different aspects of that, selling that product. And so you really have to look at those few companies that have that huge diverse amount of activities when we're looking at agribusiness and how it affects the farmer, how it affects the middleman, and how it affects the consumer, which is important as well. This graphic shows you where $1 from any food product goes. So if you look at the top there, 19 cents goes to the farm. And when we're looking at that farm, we're talking about the farmer, the management of the farm, how all of that, anything that encompasses a farm will go back to. So it's not just going right back, 19 cents is not just going right back into that farmer's pocket, it's going into their whole production. Labor is about 38.5 cents, packaging, 8 cents. If you go on down there, depreciation, there's always going to be depreciation on anything that we have, is 3.5%, advertising 4%. So you can kind of break down and see the difference of what we really see as $1 and how breaking it down where your food dollar actually goes shows you. So critically important to know and understand how farm policy works and how it affects you and I as the producer or as the consumer. And that's really important to me to make sure that you all really grasp and understand that. So what is farm policy? The whole point of farm policy is to really ensure that stabilization of the prices of really important crops and livestock in the United States. And so we try to look at farm policy so that we can prevent commodity surpluses, so that we can ensure that every farm bill has something to do with crop insurance and has something to do with payments. And so here's just a great example. We had a pretty intense drought from the years of 2011 into a little bit of 2013. We were still considered in drought-like conditions. Had farmers and ranchers not had that crop insurance and those different types of payments that the USDA offers, a lot of those farmers and ranchers would have to go bankrupt because they did not make 1 cent off of their crop. Because, for example, corn actually grew to about 4 foot tall in 2011 and then matured and did not mature enough to get a corn kernel on those cobs. So that was one thing that was really big in terms of crop production and payments. And so really, really important when we're looking at stabilization of the prices of that. Then we look at supporting agriculture. We look at supporting agriculture imports. That is really important to the industry as a whole, and especially as a world market. And then looking at conservation projects, environmental issues. So one big thing that the USDA offers young farmers and ranchers, any farmer rancher, but specifically in that 35 or years younger group will offer soil conservation programs that you can actually build terraces on your ground or build a waterway on your ground, and the government gives you money for that, which is a nice little paycheck once a year. And all that requires for some of those programs is somebody from the USDA coming out to ensure that that is there, and they take a picture of it and they're gone. I think last year I saw the guy take a picture of one of our waterways, but I didn't speak to him. He just waved, and I was hauling grain from one end to the other, and he just waved at me and said, "See you later." And then I got an email the next week that said, "Thank you for your soil conservation efforts. Your check will be in your check will be in the bank." So pretty awesome that our policy issues, even though we have a lot of them, they're truly for that farmer or rancher. Now we're going to look at federal institutions for farming and ranching and agriculture in the United States, and then we're going to look at the USDA. There are 7 mission areas that they have, the USDA budget, and how that budget is then formed into a farm bill. Okay, so federal institutions, the U.S. government obviously was created by the U.S. government, obviously created for really important aspects of America, and that was land grant institutions or universities. NEO is a land grant institution. We have A&M at the end of our name, which is pretty cool. Oklahoma State, any really state school that offers agriculture is a land grant university. Federal institutions like the USDA, ag experiment stations, which are really important. Soil conservation services, which we talked about, and then extension educators for farmers. So those are where 4-H is mainly held, but a lot of really awesome projects and aspects for farmers and ranchers. Anything from soil testing, forage testing, having different seminars in different areas, so that the farmer is always learning or the rancher is always learning is really important. The USDA, the whole reason why we have the USDA is to be a national leader in food, agriculture, and natural resources. It has over 100,000 full and part-time employees, and the really cool thing about the USDA, if you get an internship with the USDA or any type of federal government at that, they will train you, and they just have awesome benefits, and you're working for the state, so you get Memorial Day off, and it's awesome. The head of the USDA is the Secretary of Agriculture, and make sure that you know who that is. I'm not going to tell you who that is right now because I want you to research it, because we will talk about that this week in class. And then they also then developed 7 missions, which we will talk about in 1 second. So those 7 missions, they first begin with foreign policy, and we've talked a little bit about in chapter 1 about foreign policy and how it really interacts with agriculture. But we look at financial stability, we look at prices throughout different parts of the world, and how our farmers and ranchers are kind of matching up with those around the world. So that's the first one. The second one's food, nutrition, and consumer services. So we look at hunger in America. We look at different health issues in that area. We look at different aspects of nutrition, like the SNAP programs, or also known as the food stamp program. We look at food safety, which has really skyrocketed. I mean, if you want a nice paying job in agriculture, you go into food safety, because it's the inspection services, it's meat, poultry, eggs, all kind of with that. And then we have a marketing and regulatory program that comprises of 3 different agencies, and we'll get into that a little bit when we meet this week. But that has a lot to do with how we're promoting agriculture in a positive light, and which is really important to the U.S. I guess people that don't understand agriculture are kind of at a question mark at this. Why would we have natural resources and environmental agencies within the USDA? It's really because we really do work hand in hand with natural resources and ecology, and help different entities like forest fires or something of that effect that naturally happen. My favorite USDA mission area is research, education, and economics, so that we can integrate all of those into one and really analyze what we're doing in terms of promoting agriculture and putting knowledge into heads and hearts around the United States. Next and last is rural development, which is really important. So this will not only improve the economy of rural America, but gives them kind of a lifeline. So for a big thing that Farm Bureau has worked on is getting internet access to very rural areas. You know, smartphones are very, very common nowadays. Everybody has a smartphone, but not everybody has service in rural areas. And so getting Wi-Fi out there, getting service out there is very important within rural development. Hospitals are a big thing. So in states like Montana or the Dakotas, you might have to drive an hour to a hospital. They're really trying to work to make sure that you can get that you can get that space and that what you need within a good distance. This is a graphic that kind of breaks down the percentage of the Farm Bill for each of these categories. So food and food assistance and nutrition, about 70% of the Farm Bill is allocated for that. Farm and commodity programs, about 17%. Conservation and forestry, so keeping up state and federal parks, 7%, and then all others, and we'll talk about all of others like crop payments, a lot of those types of programs are 6%. Okay, so farm bills, we're going to do a fun activity in class this week, and we're going to talk about farm bills and how you, the consumer and producer, would be able to help out on a farm bill. But this is just, again, that budget, so it's going to provide funds for different farmers and ranchers around the United States, as well as agribusiness people as well. And we do it in 5-year intervals. So every 5 years, we hope to get a new farm bill. And that unfortunately doesn't happen quite on time, but we're hoping that it will in 2018 because we desperately need it. So we look at farmers groups like Farm Bureau, different farmers groups that just are the advocate or have a grassroots way of doing things in agriculture, agribusiness. We have lobbying firms for the Farm Bill, and then Congress really must fund it. It's got to be done, whether it's there or not, and then appropriate monies for that Farm Bill. So they are kind of the place where everything that's Congress is where everything happens and is put together, and you have ag committees, and it might take a year to get through, but hopefully it gets through.